Hi there. Welcome to the third recording of the Momentum course. My name is Toby Jenkins. I'm an Olympian and leadership coach. I absolutely love helping top performers who are facing major shifts to reinvent for what comes next. And as I mentioned on the previous two recordings of this course, this Momentum course is really the first chapter of a Reinvention Playbook that I've developed that has worked for executives, for founders, for business owners, for elite military, for pro sport athletes, and I know it can work for you. And really, when you're facing these major shifts, the opportunity is to go from overwhelmed by the situation to managing the stress and pressure. It's to move from uncertainty about the future to having a clear plan and clear direction and really focused next steps, and to move from feeling drained to energized and motivated. And we began to unpack this. So in the first recording, we touched on mindfulness and the importance of its role in managing these shifts. We focused on dialing up commitment as well. So you calculated your days left to live. You calculated how many days you've been alive and why those two numbers are so important. I shared my favorite question, or one of my favorite questions, which is, what if this is the last time, as a tool to come right back to the present and dial into whatever it is that we're engaging with in order to be the person we want to be and act in the way that we want to act. Because the reality is we all have finite time. It's just how we choose to spend it. That's the big question. And so in the second recording, we did a quick assessment of how things that truly matter to you are going. And so you assessed a bunch of areas by importance. You assessed them for your current levels of satisfaction. And from that, we designed some really specific actions for you to action in the next 24, 48 hours, and really dialing into what is the next step I can take, not to solve all my problems, but just to make some progress, which is so important in these times. It's so important. In this recording, I really am going to introduce the science of psychological flexibility. So let's jump into it. And I love using a story from my Olympic experience to kick us off. So I want you to imagine this for a moment, which is, it's game 3 of the Olympics. I'm playing for Australia. We're in Athens. We're playing the Greeks. It's a medal critical game. There's been a decade or more of work up until this moment. We're 30 seconds from half time and we're up by 1 goal. There's 6,000 Greeks going absolutely berserk up in the right-hand stand. There's a smattering of green and gold for the Aussies. My folks are up there as well, family, my siblings and their partners. And the Greeks miss a goal behind me. I start sprinting up the pool and the ball lands, comes flying over the top and lands in front of me. I want you to think for a minute. A question to you is, what do you think goes through an Olympian's head, Olympian's mind, in a moment like that? Well, let me share. First thing was, get me out of here. I always miss these in training, always miss these in games. I wish someone else was taking this shot. Man, what am I doing? And then trying to turn that around. Come on, mate. This is the Olympics. You've trained for this. Your family's in the stand. It's your turn to shine. This is your moment. You can do it. You can do it. And in amongst this is the full spectrum of extreme physiology. I'm absolutely pumped on the adrenaline of this moment. I'm exhausted from having been playing my heart out for a half of the game already. And there's just me and the Greek goalie 10 meters away. So I swim in with the ball, I pick it up, I balk once, I take the shot. And this story doesn't have a happy ending, I'm sorry. The Greek goalie saves it and he pulls it down. And I just sink to the bottom of the pool, absolutely mortified and stressed by the fact that I'd missed this shot. These are one of those shots that should be scored in a game. And as I bounce back up off the bottom, I look around and there's my teammate. He's couple of meters away, he'd been screaming at me, sprinting up the pool. I just hadn't seen him, hadn't heard it, totally missed it. And so the Greek goalie, of course, just to add insult to injury, launches the ball down the other end of the field. The Greek player grabs it, shoots it, scores. And so instead of being 2 goals up going into half time, suddenly we're even, and that sense of momentum had just been sucked right out of me. And what's interesting about these moments, I think, is, and what I've come to learn about these moments, is that firstly, clearly the negative thoughts aren't useful to me. Secondly, and interestingly, nor are the positive thoughts. They are equally a distraction. So my question to you is, where should my attention have been? And the very quick response to that is in the present, focused on the process, on the actions that need to take to do what matters in this moment. And even the extra bitter pill in this situation is that the exact same process applied when I was being taught this process of taking these sorts of shots as a 13-year-old growing up, as applies in an Olympic Games. There's nothing really much different. And the first step of that is to stick your head up and look around and assess the situation, get the context. And I just didn't have it. And what I've learned also is that, the science and evidence suggests that we have thousands upon thousands of emotions, of thoughts, of feelings, of sensations, of memories every single day. And the relief of beginning to understand, what the science of psychological flexibility means is that we cannot control that flood. So what can we do? Well, that's what I'm going to share with you. How you can do that. We're going to personalize your toolkit in terms of how you can apply the science of psychological flexibility for you. And look, I need to be absolutely clear here. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a coach, which means I don't play in clinical settings. I am focused on wellbeing and performance. This stuff has been validated by the World Health Organization, though, in clinical trials in 2021. It started in 1982, developed by Dr. Stephen Hayes and many others who've contributed to this framework as time has progressed. And over that period, as I say, validated by randomized controlled trials, the creme de la creme of science and evidence base. And it's learnable, it's a teachable skill. So I'm going to teach it to you in a very, very rapid fire. Let's spin up your practice way today and let's jump into it. So, open up a note if you've got one. If you've already used one from the previous recordings, please open that up again and keep it all in one spot. If you haven't, just start a freshie, wherever you like. And I want you, just as you've done that, feel free to hit stop on pause on this recording any point. But if you've done that, I'd like you just to briefly close your eyes for a minute and bring to mind a triangle. And in the bottom left of that triangle, I want you to write the words open up. At the top of the triangle, I want you to write be present. And in the bottom right of the triangle, I want you to write do what matters. So that's open up, bottom left, be present at the top, and do what matters, bottom right. Got that? Okay. Because that's what we're going to bounce around. And you can download this exercise from my website if you want to, tobyjenkins.com. If you subscribe, you'll get the whole list of questions and science and references and that sort of stuff. So feel free. But that's not what this is about. I just want to teach this part to you and get you up and running. Just you, me, and your phone to keep a note, okay? All right. So first header is open up. And open up is not about opening up to other people, although that may be a great behavior. Opening up is actually being willing to and accepting the tough stuff, the yin yang of lived experience. How do we open up to that and accept it and learn to accept it? So we're going to do two things now. Quick exercise I want you to do in your note. So underneath open up, I want you to choose a challenging situation that you're facing right now in your life somewhere, can be anywhere. Choose work if you like, or doesn't really matter. Now, choose the situation, make a note of that. And then I want you to answer these 3 questions. The first question, what are the tough thoughts that show up for you when you think about this situation? So what are the tough things that you're saying to yourself that show up for you? Write those down. As I say, please pause this video as you need it. The second question then is, what are the tough emotions that show up for you when you think about this specific situation? What are the tough emotions that show up for you? Write those down. Give you a couple of seconds. And finally, what are the tough sensations that show up for you? So is it butterflies in the stomach? Is it, sweaty palms? Is it elevated heart rate? What are the tough sensations that show up for you when you think about this situation or one that you've been in recently? Just write those down. Okay, so just in doing that little exercise, you've just practiced an evidence-based technique called diffusion. So diffusion is the creation of space between you and your thoughts, your feelings, your sensations, to just recognize them as such and see that you have the space to make a choice, that you still have the space. One way of thinking about fusion and diffusion is, if I have my hands over my face like this, I'm really fused to those thoughts, feelings, and sensations. But if I can create some space, they haven't changed, but I can now see around, see other options, make choices that are different. And so that's the opportunity with diffusion. So just in that one technique, you can, and if you're facing a similar challenging situation, even writing them down creates some space. Things like journaling spring to mind here too. The second thing that I want you to do now is, when you look at those, if you were to group all of those together, we're going to practice the second technique here. If you were to group all of those things together and answer this for me, do they have a shape? Where are they in your body? Do they have a size? Do they have a color or a texture? And can you give them, that group of tough stuff, can you give it a name? So size, shape, where in your body, texture, color, can you give it a name? And there's this really old story in Buddhism, and I'm not a Buddhist, but it's a useful analogy, I think, which is Buddha and the demon Mara go to battle, and Mara, ultimately, there's this cosmic battle. Mara slinks off. Buddha walks away unscathed. A little while later, there's a knock at Buddha's door. And he opens the door, and there's Mara standing there. And he invites Mara into tea. And he treats Mara as a revered house guest. And ultimately, Mara sits down, has tea, and walks away. But that doesn't happen just once. That keeps on happening. And Buddha keeps on inviting Mara into tea. And really the analogy here is around this idea of acceptance. So if we can write down our tough stuff, if we can give it a label, then our ability to accept it, to create the space and still make room for it, that's what this is about, because these stories are never going away. For me, it's the old imposter syndrome, fraudulence, all this stuff always shows up. And it's not an age-old story for me, and it keeps coming back. But it's also energized me and driven me in really interesting ways as well. So have a think about that for you. Then we're going to move on to the next part of the triangle. So remember, open up, be present at the top, and do what matters down the bottom right. So let's talk about be present. So put a new header in your note, be present. And being present, we talk about mindfulness, but mindfulness is not, just to be super clear, mindfulness that we're talking about is not sitting on a mountaintop saying Om to the universe. Mindfulness is actually the scalpel that sits between our reaction, which we cannot control, just what I was talking about with my Olympic experience, and our choice of response, which is that do what matters. And again, to have been able to have the awareness and the space and the capacity to just lift my head, to have a look around. So being present and mindfulness is really a very specific practice of just noticing thoughts as thoughts, feelings as feelings, sensations as sensations. And it's not so much a doing mindfulness as it is being mindful. So how can we bring our senses to the moment to be mindful? And really simple examples. And I want you to think of just one thing that you do, preferably each and every day, that you could anchor a mindfulness practice to. And example for me, really simple one and really common one for my clients as well, is with my coffee. If I am mindful with my coffee, I notice the temperature of the cup. I smell it. I truly taste it. I can see the steam rising. I can hear the kettle boiling or the stovetop bubbling. It's so exciting. I love it and I appreciate it. When I'm not mindful, I start a cup of coffee and I get to the bottom of it and it's empty. And I'm like, whoa, where did that go? And it's so disappointing. I wanted that. So, as I say, the opportunity is not to do mindfulness, but to be mindful. So what is one thing you do each day, and how can you bring your senses, touch, taste, smell, sight, sound, to those moments? So then if you practice with your coffee cup or equivalent experience, then you have a fighting chance of using that throughout your day. And the science says that it takes very little to improve, very little in terms of time frame over short periods of time to improve, executive function, memory, attention, focus, all this great stuff. That's so important to our ability to absorb these hits and challenges that we inevitably face in life and come back and perform and be the person we want to be, do the things we want to do with the people that matter, really, and live our values and sense of purpose. And we'll get to that next. So that's the end of Be Present. So open up, remember, be present at the top and do what matters in the bottom right. So now let's talk about do what matters. And when it comes to doing what matters, I want to share a quick metaphor with you. If I was to smash a whole bunch of glass on the floor and say, rightio, everyone, I want you to take your shoes off. We're going to do some barefoot motivational walking on the broken glass. You'd say, Toby, go away. That is probably the most polite thing. On the flip side, if I say, let me just change one condition. So bring to mind the people or person most important to you in the world and put them on the other side of the glass. And they're in distress and they need your help. Are you now willing to walk across the glass? And typically I get people, they change their minds. Yes. What does that show us? It shows us a couple of things. One, we're terrible at pointless pain. Terrible. The second is that we had a clear motivation. We knew what was important on the other side and therefore we were willing to do it. The third is that in that moment, when you got clear on importance, you changed your relationship to the pain. Suddenly it was in service of something that mattered to you. You were prepared to not just endure it, but embrace it in service of what matters. And this is a huge part of why things like getting clear on purpose, getting clear on values, knowing who matters to you, knowing what matters to you, knowing what energizes you. All of these things are guiding points. They're decision-making tools for how you engage in the world. So I'm going to spin you up a really quick definition of doing what matters. So if you can start a new heading in your note, do what matters. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds for each of these questions. So question number 1. What are your values? Go. I'm going to time this. Actually, I'm just going to give you these questions. You just hit pause and take the time, but please do 30 seconds, because 30 seconds is all you need. In my experience of hundreds of these conversations, the first 30 seconds are the seconds that those responses are the ones that really matter. So use them. So here are the questions. Hit pause and take 30 seconds for you for each of them. What are your values? Is the first question. Second question, who is important to you? Hit pause, take 30 seconds. Third question, what is important to you? It can be concepts, it can be whatever. Fourth question, what is your purpose? This is often a tricky one, that's okay. Just again, it's about going 0 to 1, getting a draft out. So just punch it into the note. What is your purpose? Take whatever shows up first. Fifth question, what would you willingly do for free? And the final question is, what energizes you? Take 30 seconds for each of those and take whatever shows up first, because your gut instinct on this stuff is often 80-90% of the way there. You can always refine it after this. And one call out that I just want to make now that you've answered those questions is, I really hope that you're in the 1 out of 20. In terms of the conversations I've had, one person in 20 includes their own name on the who is important list. If you don't have your own name on it, can you please add your own name to it? Because without you, there is no relationship to anything or anyone else. And it's really important when you think about well-being, when you think about performance, when you think about your energy and motivation in order to serve others and be the person you want to be with the people you love, in the situations you love, and creating the contribution and impact that you want to have, that only you can deliver. You are important in that equation. So please put your name on the list. So look, what we've done is like a really hard and fast spin up of the development of a practice of psychological flexibility. Open up. You've explored some of the tough stuff that shows up for you in one situation. Often those themes play out across a lot. In Be Present, you've determined a mindfulness exercise that you can anchor to in a moment, and practice each day, and hopefully can build on that practice. You've also begun to give yourself an articulation of what matters to you. What matters to you. It's so cool, because you can use all of these things as decision-making points, as guiding principles through uncertainty, through ambiguity. You can use this stuff all the time. And that's where I love it to be, because it's, whilst this course is my absolute best of bringing this stuff to life, the reality is that in any situation like this, all of the value, or so much of the value, gets created in practice. So much of the value gets created in practice. And that would be my ask, is that you take what you've learned over these 3 recordings and put it into practice. Let me know how you go. Let me know in the comments. Hit me with questions. I want to know. Because this stuff can really help go from stuck to started, to build that momentum. And really, this is the opening gambit of reinvention. And look, if you've enjoyed this course, then you might be interested in my executive reinvention program. I'm going to be opening it up in the next little while, and there's probably only going to be a handful of spots, to be honest with you, given my bandwidth. But man, I'd love to work with you. If you like this stuff, if you want to run down this rabbit hole and go all in, I would love to hear from you. Because that program's about taking everything we've learned in this course and going into depth, personalizing it, putting it into practice, doing the reps with accountability, with support. with the systems and structures and the toolkit that's personalised to you, that works for you. If that sounds like something that's of interest, please subscribe, reach out. As I say, I'm going to be launching that in the next couple of days. In the meantime, please leave me a message, leave a comment down below this video, wherever you are watching this video. Reach out, ask me a question. I'd love to hear from you. Or if you found this useful, this video or the previous recordings as well in this course, please share it with someone who you think might need it right now, who you think might find it useful. Really look forward to keeping in touch. I'm really grateful, as I said in the first recording, time is finite. I appreciate you spending this time with me. It's really important to me, and I hope it's important to you too, that you make the most of the time and the choices you have in making the contribution that only you can make. That's my aspiration for you. Take care. Good luck. As I say to my girls, go get them.